guest today is Mark Williams, also known as Mr. LinkedIn. Now, I love that. Well, we had a long conversation about that last time, so we'll ask Mark to share what that's all about. But Mark is widely regarded as one of the world's top LinkedIn experts. He's also an accomplished keynote speaker and author. And in today's conversation, Mark is going to share his passion for his niche subject. And actually, he's going to demonstrate why LinkedIn is such a key business tool for us as coaches. And I'm planning to sort of ask Mark to share with us a whole variety of things like the differences between company and personal profiles, and some top tips on creating a profile to get us noticed as coaches, and maybe some do's and don'ts as well. So I hope you have your notebooks or whatever it is that you use to take notes today. You're not going to want to miss anything that Mark shares today, because there's going to be lots on offer. So let's dive in. And I want to say right up in the open, and Mark, welcome back to Coaching Conversations. It's such a pleasure to get you back with us. You're such a busy man, so it's lovely to have you back with us for another conversation.
Thanks, Sharon. It's an honour to be invited back. Obviously, I didn't put you off last time, so either that or no one else was available.
No, we had a fabulous conversation. And the feedback we had afterwards was how much people enjoyed it. So
Good.
it is my pleasure to host you back again. So thank you for doing that.
Pleasure.
Now, Mark, you've been known as Mr. LinkedIn for quite some time. Um, I wonder if you wouldn't mind just sort of starting with sort of how that happened, and maybe what first drew you to LinkedIn in the first place.
Okay. Well, I mean, the Mr. LinkedIn thing has been an ongoing saga for many years now. In 2008, I started training LinkedIn, and I'll kind of answer the second part of your question as to how that happened in a minute. But at the time, LinkedIn was still very much just largely a recruitment orientated platform, and very little else was happening on LinkedIn really. But my background was recruitment, and so I had that introduction to it through recruitment. As I say, I'll come on to that in a minute. But there was a guy in the recruitment industry that was quite well known and quite well respected. And I had various conversations with him about what I was doing. And he was quite an enthusiastic supporter of mine. And he said to me, he was a guy with quite a strong Cockney accent. And he said, you're the world's most knowledgeable guy on LinkedIn, which I don't think I really was. I certainly didn't feel like I was at the time. He said, in fact, you're like Mr. LinkedIn. And I said, oh, that's got a ring to it. So I decided all I would do, it wasn't a branding thing. I just decided that I was at the time signing up to Twitter. It shows how long ago this was. And still fairly early days of Twitter, really. And I just thought I'd pick Mr. LinkedIn, which wasn't available. But Mr. underscore LinkedIn was. So I just went with that, and didn't really think much of it, to be honest, after that. But it just, because it was a Twitter name, even though obviously that's not LinkedIn, I did actually change my URL on LinkedIn, which everyone can do, and change that to linkedin.com/in/Mr. LinkedIn. But nobody really notices that particularly. But for some reason, it just kind of stuck, and everyone started calling me Mr. LinkedIn. And so fast forward probably about 3 or 4 years, as LinkedIn themselves were growing, they started to, well, I say started to, they were at a size where they got their own kind of legal counsel. And they started to justify their existence, I guess, looking for things that they could do that would make them look good. And one of those things was looking at people like me who are using LinkedIn and potentially using their trademark. So I got a cease and desist email from somebody at LinkedIn, To which I replied saying, "Look, I don't. This isn't my brand. I don't use this as a brand. It's just what everyone calls me. So I don't know what you want me to do. Do you want me to just every time someone calls me Mr. LinkedIn, just say, no, no, that's not my name. You're not allowed to call me that because it's a trademark infringement. I can do if you want me to." And they were like, "No, no, no, we don't want you to do that. But we don't want you to use it in any branding," which I never did. Over the years, they kind of softened their stance, and lots of people were using the trademark in their branding. So I did use it a little bit more. And then more recently, a couple of years ago now, they a law firm actually contacted me and said, "We don't want you to use Mr. LinkedIn." And again, I said, "Well, I'm not really using it. I mean, I was using it a bit more, but not officially anyway. I didn't like a website, MrLinkedIn.com or anything like that. It wasn't really used much." I did have to change the name of my podcast at the time from LinkedIn Formed to Informed only because I couldn't use the LinkedIn bit. So, but the funny story around that is that again, very early days for me. I was probably 2 years into LinkedIn training at the time, and as I say, LinkedIn was mainly about recruitment. And so my brand was really known amongst the recruitment industry and corporate recruiters. So recruitment agencies and corporate recruiters are the people that mainly knew me to start with. And LinkedIn was celebrating its fifth birthday. No, no, not fifth birthday, reaching 5 million users in the UK. That's right. It's a long time ago. And they had a big party in London. And the guest of honor was a guy called Reid Hoffman. Now, Reid Hoffman is the co-founder of LinkedIn because, of course, you can't have founders anymore. They always have to be co-founders, even though the reality is he was really the founder of LinkedIn. There were some other people involved, and I'm sure they played their part, but they weren't Reid Hoffman. So he was like, he really was Mr. LinkedIn. Anyway, I arrived at this venue somewhere in the West End, and it was winter time, and so I had a coat on. I went to the cloakroom to put my coat in the cloakroom, and meanwhile, I noticed as I was queuing up for the cloakroom, there was this crowd gathering around somebody, and I thought, "Oh, who's that?" And then I realised it was Reid Hoffman because obviously I recognised him. I'd seen pictures of him, and then there was a guy at the other side, so further back than Reid Hoffman, who had known me for years. Chap sadly no longer with us, actually. Quite a character, and he shouted at the top of his voice. I caught his eye, and he waved like this. He went, "Mr. LinkedIn." At which point, Reid Hoffman turned around. And of course, he didn't mean Reid Hoffman, he meant me. So, which was quite amusing at the time. So there you go. So that's the Mr.
I love
LinkedIn bit.
that.
That your second question was how I got into it in the first place. And so, as I say, I was in recruitment. I was running a recruitment business and had lots of people working for me. It's quite a sales orientated environment. And a couple of the guys that were working for me started to use LinkedIn. This is way back in about 2004, 2005, something like that. LinkedIn only started in 2002. So, they were playing with this thing. And I was not a fan. I mean, I didn't really understand it, but what I did understand was that in the environment that we were in, my view was quite strongly that you don't make money by sitting staring at a computer screen. You need to get on the phone and speak to people, right? So I was not happy that these guys that were supposed to be on the phone were actually sat looking at a computer screen. So I had a word with one of them, who happened to be, quite a top performer, and he took me to one side and said, "Honestly, I think you need to look at this. I'm not wasting time. I'm actually gaining quite a lot of market intelligence by looking at this website because I can literally map an organization. I can look at organizations that we're targeting, and I can find all the key contacts because they're all on LinkedIn." And that kind of sparked my interest. So that's when I signed up, and this is 2005, and started an account and started to look for people that I knew. And of course, I found some, found quite a few, and then I'd connect with them. And then, having connected with them, then I would see who they're connected to, and I started to see links that I didn't know existed. So, for instance, somebody that I'd done a lot of business with, a really good contact of mine, was connected to other really good contacts of mine, plus people that were the opposite, people that I didn't know but would like to get to know. And to me, that's kind of the pivotal moment for me with LinkedIn when I thought, this is a really powerful tool for business development because there's a real opportunity here. For years, by that time I've been in business, 20 years or so. And I had like most people who've been around for that long, I had a sort of black book of contacts, and you lived by your contacts. Your relationships were everything, and you'd leverage those relationships in order to grow your business. And so it seemed to me that what was happening was that something that traditionally had been kept in a black book was now just there for everyone to see. And I could see plenty of opportunity with that in terms of business development. So, whilst LinkedIn in those days was seen by most people as a place where you go to recruit people or advertise jobs, and we were a recruitment business, to me, I didn't see it that way at all, even though most of my staff did. I saw it as, hold on a second, I can look and see people and see who they're connected to and go, I didn't realize you two knew each other. That's fantastic. Also, notice that you know this person who is someone I don't know, but I'd love an introduction. And so I started to encourage my team to do that. And then from that, we kind of built on lots of other ways of using LinkedIn for business development. And so I effectively was training them. Um, and then I thought, I don't really know what I'm doing with this thing. So there must be companies out there that do LinkedIn training. There must be companies that do that. So we'll get one in. I couldn't find anyone, not in the UK. There's a couple in the States at the time, but I couldn't find anybody at all in the UK. So I thought, right, I can see a business opportunity here. So that's what I did. So that's how I set it up, and I was the first person in the UK to actually do that and set up as a LinkedIn trainer. And in my first year or so, typically the response that I got from people was, "Why on earth would you need to learn how to use LinkedIn? I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right?" um, and I often tell the story. I went to a networking event in Manchester, near where I lived, and I'd only just decided to do it. I'd only just set up. This was my first opportunity in a physical networking environment to tell people what I did. So, I sort of built myself up for this, and I turned up at this event, and I was kind of queuing up to get a coffee, and there was a guy in front of me, and we just started talking, and he was about, as I remember, he was about 6'4", very, very well dressed, very well spoken, and he shook my hand in a kind of, coming down, shaking my hand. All the body language was about dominance, a very firm handshake. And he said, "So, Mark, what do you do?" And I said, "It's my first chance to tell someone." So I said, "Oh, I'm a LinkedIn trainer." And he went, "Oh, you work for LinkedIn?" I went, No, I don't work for LinkedIn, but I train people how to use LinkedIn." He said, "I'm on LinkedIn. I don't really use it much." He said, "Anyway, so what else do you do?" I went, no, that's what I do. Just LinkedIn training, nothing else, just LinkedIn training. At which point he burst out laughing. As I say, he was quite a big guy, and he made a fairly big laugh. And the whole room looked round to see what was so funny. And I felt like that, I felt about that
Oh,
big.
Mark.
And my great dream, I thought this was just the best idea ever. All of a sudden, felt like the worst idea ever. And that kind of sinking feeling. I carried on through the networking event, but it didn't go well. And I got back in my car, and I remember driving home and thinking, what was I thinking? Why would this be a job? I mean, I don't know what I was thinking. I obviously wasn't, in the right mind. But then as the journey, I was about an hour home from there. As the journey developed, I remember thinking to myself, hold on a second, he's not really on LinkedIn. And just because he's like this, well spoken, well educated, very smart looking lawyer doesn't mean that he knows anything about LinkedIn. He actually said he's not really on it very much himself. So why should I let that bother me or put me off? And by the time I woke up the next morning, I was really determined to prove him wrong. And that's how I kind of got the real motivation to get out there and start knocking down doors and persuading people that actually it would be beneficial to them to actually use LinkedIn in a more effective way. So there you go.
Oh, I love that. And you can really hear the passion, sort of, and I love the reframe. It's so easy, isn't it? When we're beginnings of something, a new idea, a new sort of business idea, and then, we psych ourselves up and we don't get the response that perhaps we expected in our heads when we thought about it. It can really give us a knock, but I just love the reframe, sort of, yeah, who are you to tell me that it's not a good idea?
Mm.
What is it that you believe, or maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, because as I say, you really hear the passion there. Why is it that you believe that LinkedIn is such an essential tool? I mean, specifically for, we're talking about coaches here today. So obviously it's a great marketing tool. You've already shared how you were using that with your team. But fast forward to sort of, over the last few years, you've been supporting lots of people. So, why is it that you think it's an essential tool for coaches today?
Well, yeah, I see LinkedIn as an online networking site, right? So this is a business networking facility that allows you the opportunity to build and maintain relationships with people. And those relationships become important to you either because those people become customers of yours or more likely refer you to customers. Okay. And obviously that's how networking works. And, we all know that. And we've all been to kind of, in person networking events. But the problem with in-person networking is that, and I was doing a lot of it in those early days, but you can turn up to an event and, meet a lot of very nice people, but kind of come away thinking, well, that was like 3 hours or 4 hours of my life that I'm not really sure that that's going to build anything or I'm going to get anything from it. And, you might do. And if you keep doing it over time, then yes, you probably will. But for someone like me, I had no geographical restrictions to where I was going to work. Well, within reason. Um, I could train anybody anywhere, really. I mean, we weren't doing online training in the early days, but and so it just seemed very restricted to go to a networking event locally or relatively locally. And of course, being online opens up the whole world, right? And so the opportunity is potentially enormous. Plus, of course, you've got the targeting facilities through doing searches on LinkedIn and really narrowing it down to the exact people that you're very interested in. All of those things to me made a lot of sense in the early days and still do today. Obviously, it's a very different tool today, and the kind of concept of business development on LinkedIn is, very well known. It certainly wasn't early days, but it's very commonly thought of in that context now. Although LinkedIn themselves, interestingly, are still far more interested in recruitment because that's where they make their money. That's kind of their main focus in terms of, so everything they do is always orientated towards how they can leverage the platform to make them more money in terms of selling their recruitment products. But for most users, we very much will see it as a networking and business development tool, and I think it can be misused for sure, and we can get onto that. But I think in the right hands and with the right people, it's a hugely beneficial facility that we can use. If we misuse it, or enough people misuse it, then it won't be. And one of my bugbears is that, I've always said people that use tools like automation tools, some AI tools, AI is not a bad thing, but can be. Um, and people that try and cut corners and try to do things in a way that is all about efficiency, all about kind of, trying to cut corners, hacks, all that business that you see people talking about, um, ruin the platform for everybody else.
Yeah.
This is a valuable resource that we need to look after. We can't rely on LinkedIn to always be able to look after it for us. And I've always had this interesting relationship with LinkedIn, the company, because they very much see it as their thing, their tool, and they'll tell us how we use it. I've always seen it as no, no, no. You've made it feel like it's like a company that builds children's playgrounds, and they might build it in the shape of a, I don't know, a car, So it's a climbing frame in the shape of a car, and their idea is that kids are going to climb on this and pretend to drive a car. But actually, if you look at kids on a climbing frame, they use it all kinds of different ways. They use their imagination to try different things and try and use it in a way that they wish to. And I've always seen LinkedIn like that. It belongs to us. Yes, LinkedIn clearly do own it, and that's important. But the part that we play is massively important, both in terms of making sure we use it in the right way, that we get benefit from it, but also in terms of protecting it and making sure that it's a valuable resource in years to come as well.
Love that. So let's dive into that a little bit deeper then. So I'm going to say, sort of collectively, that some of us might treat LinkedIn a little bit like going to the gym. We know we should use it, but we avoid it until we really, really have to. So, what would you say to anybody who's listening today that has perhaps what we could call LinkedIn avoidance? What would
Yeah.
you say to them?
Look, it's like anything that involves people, right? So if you imagine, I don't know, a club of some sort, okay, that could be a golf club, a running club, or whatever it is. If you are just a casual member of that club, you're never really going to develop any relationships. If they just see you once or twice a year, or just occasionally every now and then, you're never really going to develop any relationships, and as a result, you're not going to get as much from it. Now, add to that the fact that this is about business and this is about reputation, and the relationships that you can build around that as well. But, there is a perception that you need to be aware of, I think, is that there are communities that build on LinkedIn, and these communities will notice that you just turn up when you need it. Job seekers are classic for this, right? And I know that's not the context of this discussion today. But I always say to people who are job seekers, you shouldn't be using LinkedIn like a job board. This is a business networking facility, and it's like a community, and you should be an active part of that community all the time, right? Not just turn up when it suits you, when you want a job, when you want something for your purposes, because that is not what collaborative communities are about. Yeah. Nobody wants that person in that club of whatever it might be to just turn up occasionally and expect to get something from it when everyone else, commits on a regular basis and contributes to that community on a regular basis. They're the people that get the most benefit from it because they're recognized and respected for being someone that turns up. See it that way rather than this kind of tool, this mechanical thing that you go in and use. See it as a community, understand that behind every profile is a real person with a real personality and someone that you could get to know. You can't get to know everyone on LinkedIn, there's over 1 billion people, but you can find communities and build relationships with those communities, and that's where you're going to get the most benefit from it, rather than just kind of turning up as and when you feel that need, if you like.
I love that. And you mentioned sort of community and networking a couple of times, and it is really important, particularly for us as coaches, because it is very much a people to people industry. So we need to be networking and connecting with real people. So where that is concerned, just going to sort of ask you a question about that. Now, I have lots of connections, and I'm connected also to people that I don't know, but I regularly get connection requests. Pretty much every day there'll be a connection request. A lot of the time will be from people that I don't know. So what advice would you say that you would have about who to accept a connection from, and maybe who to send connection invites to build your network?
Yeah. Well, so you certainly don't want to be connecting to anybody and everybody. You couldn't anyway because you are restricted in the number of connections you can have on LinkedIn. It's not massive restriction; it's like 30,000. You don't need to get anywhere near that kind of number for LinkedIn to be a useful tool. The guideline I would say is that in terms of accepting connection requests, you accept a request from someone where you can see there is relevance. Now, I totally understand that that term relevance is very subjective, but you have to decide what you think constitutes a relevant connection for you. Now, that doesn't mean, and that they have to be someone that you look at and go, oh, they could be a customer or a client, right? Now, I might, I think with coaching, it's a difficult one because some coaches aren't specialized and others are. Let's imagine that you're very specialized in one particular area. Industry wise, let's say that you specialize in a specific pharmaceutical industry. I'm just making that up off the top of my head. Okay, so someone asks you to connect who's not in the pharmaceutical industry. So you go, they're never going to be a client because that's not what I specialize in. That's not my area. Therefore, I'm going to say no. Well, hold on a second. Just think about that for a second. Is there a possibility that they may be connected to and building relationships with people that do constitute someone that would be a potential customer. Okay. Are they active on LinkedIn? Are they somebody? I have this term that I use called associates, and I know that that term is used in coaching and coaching organizations quite a lot. So I don't want to mix it up with that and confuse you, but it's just something that a term that I've used for LinkedIn connections. So you'll have LinkedIn connections that are people that you know, and anybody that you know, you should connect to. If they're on LinkedIn and you know them, just connect to them. Don't overcomplicate that one. Don't think, oh, but they're not relevant, or doesn't matter whether they're relevant or not. If you know them well, just connect to them. Okay. You never know who they know or who they may know in the future. So just connect to them. The second type of person would be, well, these are people that are highly relevant, people that I would want to do business with, might be a potential customer, highly, highly relevant, like a red hot person that I would see as being interesting and exciting to me as a coach. Therefore, yes, connect to those people as well. And then you've got what I call associates. An associate would be somebody that is defined in this way. They are relevant in the sense that they are likely to be connected to the kind of people that you would like to build visibility to or with, right? So your target audience is one side, but this person is likely to be highly visible to the people that you want to reach. And this is important because as long as they are active, if that person becomes an active follower of yours, by being a connection. And what I mean by that is that when you post content, they potentially comment on it, ideally, and you comment on their stuff. Then what's going to happen is they are going to take your post by commenting on it and put it in front of the people that you're really interested in. So they are a relevant connection. Okay. Now, you could argue you don't necessarily need to connect to them because just by them following you, they are going to be somebody that will see your content just as much as a connection would. Okay. The difference with a connection is that you can send them direct messages, which can help facilitate a closer relationship. Okay. So, I've always said when you start off on LinkedIn, you are focused on connections. When I say start off, I mean, if you're less than 100 connections, you should be focused on building connections, connecting people. But as you start to develop that number and that number gets higher, you then start to focus more on people following you. Now, numbers can be very misleading here because, 5,000 to one person is 500 to another in effect, because every market's different, right? But what I would say generally is you get to a point with connections where there is a law of diminishing returns. And that is often around 5,000 for a lot of people. Not always, but often. And beyond that point, you might want to more focus on people following you. And you'll only connect with people where you see there being a real benefit in the ability to send them direct messages. Okay. And by direct messages, a direct message on LinkedIn to a first tier connection should only ever be something that is a conversation and not a sales pitch. Okay. Never ever on LinkedIn get into a position where you're sending people messages where the intention is very clear from the recipient that you want to do business with that person. Okay. And I've worded that carefully. The interpretation from the recipient is that they feel that you want their business. Okay. It's not about what you think. It's not about that you think it's not a very salesy message, whatever. Think about it from their point of view. And if they would potentially think that the reason that you've sent that message, or the message behind that message, if you like, is that you want their business, then don't do it. Okay. Initial messages to connection should always be about how you can help them. And I don't mean how you can help them become better at their job. I mean how you can help them in terms of LinkedIn. So it might be, look, I've got lots of connections. Let me know, now that we're connected, you can see some of my connections. Let me know if there's anybody there that you want to be introduced to, and I'll happily help. Or if there's anything else I can do to facilitate your time on LinkedIn or help you with LinkedIn in any way, shape, or form. That's the right approach, because what you're trying to do is show them that you're there to try and help them. And you're not asking for anything from them whatsoever. the relationship over time will develop through content and engagement. And it may well then lead to getting on the phone or going and seeing them. And then maybe the sales process might start in full earnest. But don't do that on LinkedIn. Now, and I'm sure many people on this webinar today have had that situation where someone invites them to connect, they look at them, they go, oh, I guess there's no harm in saying yes. So they say yes. And then literally almost immediately or within an hour or so, they get a message that's pitching them in some way, shape, or form. Now, a lot of those are often automated. And again, just going back to my point I made earlier, that's terrible use of LinkedIn, something that's just going to ruin the platform if people do it too much. And they don't do that. And if someone does that to you, I just straight away don't give them a second chance. I just disconnect to them straight away. I haven't got time, and we shouldn't feel that we have time to have to deal with people that do that. Right? There's plenty of
Mm,
people out there on LinkedIn who just move on. Right? And
mm,
equally, from your point of view, if you invite someone to connect and they say yes, by all means send them a message. And it's actually quite good practice to send them a message, and I'll explain why in a second. Um, but that message should be all about them and not about you, and all about trying to help them. Now, the reason why it's important to send a message to a first tier connection at the point you connect or soon after is that at the point you connect, the algorithm is viewing them as important to you, or potentially important to you is probably a better way of putting that. But it does actually mean that if they did a post after connecting, you're quite likely to see it. But it probably is going to be the only post you'll see from them. Okay. But if you send them a direct message and they reply, and that's the critical bit, of course, they have to reply, then the chances are that you're going to see their content more going forward, and they're also going to see yours going forward. Now, that won't last forever. There has to be a continuation of engagement on each other's content for that to continue, but it's a great way of starting things off with someone to understand that the algorithm's job is to keep people on LinkedIn. You see a lot of stuff written about the algorithm. A lot of people talk about it. Of course, there isn't. We talk about the algorithm like it's just one thing. There's multiple algorithms all over LinkedIn doing different things. But in terms of all of those algorithms, their job is to keep us on LinkedIn. Every social media platform is the same. And that's why Meta gets such bad press, because some that they're so focused on advertising, they just want to keep people on the page all the time, and that leads them to doing some things that perhaps we are uncomfortable with. LinkedIn's the same in terms of its mechanisms. It's there to keep you on the page. So think about it that way. What can I do that's going to keep this other person on the page? Right? Whatever you
mm.
do that's in line with the algorithm, so working alongside the algorithm, whatever it's trying to do, you're kind of working along with it, then you're more likely to benefit from that.
Love that, Mark. And you're absolutely spot on. The amount of times I've had exactly what you described just now. Somebody has offered me a connection, and I've looked at them and thought, oh, yeah, no harm in connecting. So I pressed accept, and almost straight away in my DM, they're selling to me. And it's like, honestly, please, you just
Mm,
warm up the connect. You wouldn't sort of walk up to somebody in a
mm.
real life situation without sort of like the pleasantries and getting to know someone, walk straight up to them and start to pitch at them. Well, I would hope that you wouldn't. And certainly
Yeah.
coaches, I hope you wouldn't. Really important that, we stay ethical, and we don't go into aggressive marketing, because it's going to give our profession a really, really bad name. So please do listen to what Mark said. Make the connections, be of service, be of help. Don't go straight in aggressively marketing to people. I'm seeing it so much out there, and it is such a shame.
I think for
But
coaches as well, this is particularly relevant,
yeah,
because,
it
we
is.
are, by the nature of what we do, we are studying people and understanding people. And yet, somehow, for some of us, when we go online, we forget all those people skills and we start
Yeah,
acting like a machine. And,
yeah,
and certainly my experience of coaches, and I've worked with coaches and I've had coaches, is trust is a massive part of that relationship. I really need to
absolutely.
comfortable that this is someone that I can trust. So don't start a relationship by breaking that trust straight off,
Mm.
or create an environment where someone thinks you're trying to get something out of them. You know,
Yeah.
it's never going to build something. You're never going to get anywhere with it. And so that's a big mistake that a lot of people make. They go into kind of they see LinkedIn as a marketing tool, and I think this is a mindset thing. Don't approach LinkedIn as a marketing tool. Approach it as a networking tool. Put your networking hat on and behave in a way that you would if you were networking with someone face to face. And that's a pretty good rule of thumb in terms of how to use
Mhm.
LinkedIn.
Totally, 100% align with you there, Mark. Let's talk a little bit more then about becoming more visible on LinkedIn and what we need to do. So there's lots of sort of information out there. There are different types of profiles. Could you perhaps walk us through the difference between personal and company? Personal profiles and company pages, and perhaps where coaches need to focus their energy.
Yeah, I mean, there really a company page is a very basic part of LinkedIn. There's not a huge amount of information in there. They are designed for medium to large organizations. They're not really designed for one person or two person businesses. Um, they come in useful if you want to advertise. That's the one thing you can't do from a personal profile in the same way that you can from a company page. So they're useful for that. But I think if you are working for an organization or associated to an organization, then by all means link your profile to the company page. But and you know, if you are employing people and you have several coaches working for you, then again create a company page, makes sense to do so. And you can occasionally post from that company page. But really with coaching, what we're talking about is personal branding. And so I mean, I would argue for anybody using LinkedIn, your personal profile is significantly more important than a company page. But for coaches, I could even argue that you could get away without a company page. Unless you wanted to go down the advertising route, you could get away without having a company page at all. I have got one, but that's largely because I'm a LinkedIn trainer. Why wouldn't I? But I don't really use it. You know, I never post from it. Just seems to me like we've all got limited time. There's plenty of other things that we need to do. You know, why would you use some of your valuable LinkedIn time on a company page that just isn't going to get the reach and the visibility that your personal profile will? Essentially, the reason I mentioned advertising is that LinkedIn um, want to sell you ads through a company page. And if they allowed you, when you posted from a company page, to get the visibility that you can from a personal page, um, then you wouldn't advertise. There'd just be no point. Advertising allows you to target and reach a much wider audience. But in order for that to work, they also have to restrict the visibility of company page content. That's partly why people that create company pages and post content get really disappointed with the results. The other reason is most LinkedIn users are not that bothered or interested in companies unless they're looking for a job. So they're not really interested in corporate brands, they're interested in people because, as I said, it's a networking community, right? So it's a bit like going to an in-person networking event, you know, dressed in a corporate uniform, and someone coming up and saying, "Oh, hi, what's your name?" And you go, "Well, um, uh, uh, never mind what my name is. You know, this is who I work for. Well, I'm the Coaching Academy. Nice to meet you." And they'd be like, "Okay, but who are you?"
Yeah.
And that's what we want to know, right? When we do business with someone, we want to know who they are and build a relationship with them as individuals. And that's how LinkedIn works. So yeah, there are lots of very specific differences, but broadly speaking, the difference is LinkedIn's a people-to-people network. Focus your attention on your personal page. You're going to get significantly more out of it than you would out of a company page. No harm in having one, but I wouldn't waste too much time on it, to be honest.
Mm. Okay. So with that in mind then, what would be maybe the top 3 things that, anyone here today could do to improve their profile?
So that there, you need to have a profile that's optimized so that if people are searching for you, they can find you. A lot of people will use LinkedIn, and more so these days than ever before, to find people. Right. So it's a great database of professionals. So, oh, I'm looking for a coach, you know, who specializes in this, this, and this. I'll just put that into a LinkedIn search and I'll find them, won't I? They're bound to be there. Obvious place to look. And I think more people are understanding that these days. Now, to optimize a profile, um, You obviously need to think about the right words for your profile. Keyword optimization is critical. And there are two main fields that you need to think about with regards to that. Keywords anywhere in your profile have value, but there are two that stand out in particular. Number one is actually your job title. Now, job title is a 100-character field, current job title, this is. And people will put, coach as their job title. Well, what a waste, right? You've got 100 characters. So think about the keywords, the areas that you specialize in that someone's going to search for. If I'm searching for a coach, I'm unlikely to just search for coach. What other things would I put in? What other keywords, specialisms that I'm going to put in there that you offer that I might search for? Get them into your job title field. And the way to do that is, without it looking odd, is just start with your job title and then put specializing in keyword, 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 up to 100 if you can get, if you can go that far. All right. So that's your job title. The reason for that is that field's quite far down your profile, right? So why would that be optimized more than anything else? Well, remember what I said before, LinkedIn make most of their money out of recruitment. When recruiters search LinkedIn, they search on job titles, right? So that's why that field is particularly optimized in the LinkedIn search. Now, the second one is the headline, which is the bit that sits underneath your name, right at the top of your profile. And a headline needs to serve two purposes. One, optimization. So keywords in there are also important, not as important as the job title field. It's difficult to differentiate because if you think about it, most people's headline starts off as their job title because what LinkedIn does automatically, it takes your job title, company name, and that's your headline, right? Now, you should change that, but change it to other keywords, plus making sure that it's descriptive in a way that very clearly identifies to the reader very quickly what you do and why you are important to them. Now, there's lots of different techniques that you'll see people recommending on this. I'm not a fan of I help people with. I get why some people like it. For me, you've got 220 characters in this field. For me, it's kind of wasting characters because I help people with, they're not keywords. Nobody's going to search for those, right? And I don't think you need to say that. Like if you say, like in my profile, I'll say LinkedIn training. I don't just say I help people with LinkedIn. I just go LinkedIn training. I mean, obvious, right? We're not stupid. We can work that one out for ourselves. So separate them with like a dot or something of that nature. You see people using pipes, which are these vertical lines. Just be careful of that. There are quite unique circumstances, but there are circumstances where that can mess up a search. You see a lot of people separating keywords with these vertical lines. I'd avoid that just for that occasional situation where it can mess up a search for someone. So just use dots or something like that. Separate these words. It doesn't need to be a narrative as such. So they're two very important fields in terms of optimization. But the other thing about your profile is you need to see it as a personal branding site. Yeah. So this is a website for your personal brand. And therefore you need to tell your story. Okay. If people are going to, it's all about know, like, trust. Okay. So trust is only going to come in time. Know is about visibility, and I'll come on to that. That's about your activity. But like is also about, I come to your profile and I feel I've gotten an infinity with it somehow. Yes, you look like you're the sort of person that I need. You've got all the relevant expertise and the things that I'm looking for. But there's plenty like that. There's plenty of people out there that meet that criteria. But the difference between you and the others is you're my type of person. And that needs to be understood, both from your activity and your profile. So it's really important, I think, to write and deliver a profile that is authentic and real. And this is the bit that people find incredibly difficult to do. And there's no shortcut to this. You have to sit down and think seriously about, how am I presenting myself? Who am I? Am I coming across as being really me? And I'm not falling into this trap of marketing and trying to produce something, an image that I'm actually not. Accept and understand in this world that there's going to be people out there that just don't like you. They look at your profile or they see your activity and they see your content and they go, you're not my cup of tea at all. And that is absolutely fine. In fact, it's probably a good thing. What you want is, if that's the case, there's also going to be at least as many, probably more people that go, you are my cup of tea. I really like where you're coming from. What you shouldn't do is be somewhere in between the two, trapped in this mediocre land of nothingness. And that's what most people do with their profiles. Yeah, it comes across as grey, nothing, don't really, it's very safe. There's nothing in there that gives me a sense of who you are and what you're all about. And one final point on profiles, I'd strongly recommend using video in your profile. There's no better way of presenting yourself in a way that people get a real feel for who you are and build that trust, start to build that trust that's really important. And you can do that in the featured section, which falls underneath your about section in your profile. You will have to create a YouTube channel to do that and link to it, but that's fine. You can do that free and easy to do. Create a little video of you just explaining who you are and introducing yourself to the audience when they first view your profile.
Love that. Love that, Mark. So once a coach has a decent profile and they've looked at their, optimization and the headers and et cetera, et cetera, how can they get noticed without that sort of salesy sort of approach?
Yeah. So the first thing to do, people always go straight to posting, and that's not the right thing to do. All right. The first thing to do is to start finding people who produce content on LinkedIn that is relevant and interesting to your target audience. Okay. So again, you've got to put yourself in the place of your target audience, the people that you really want to reach, and think about what motivates them, what interests them, what they're going to be interested in. Right. And then find people that are posting content like that, follow them, and engage with their content. In effect, what we're doing is we're joining a conversation. So, again, if we were talking in person networking here, there's a group of people over there in the corner, 5 or 6 people in, and they're talking about whatever, right? And that subject that they're talking about, is of interest to your target audience. So, you go and join in. Of course, the difference on LinkedIn is that potentially thousands and tens of thousands of people could see that. So you're not joining a conversation. You're not joining a conversation on the basis of, hey, I'm an expert. I can tell you all about this, right? Let me show you how knowledgeable I am. What you're doing is adding value to the conversation, asking questions, getting involved, adding value, right? Always think about how you can add value to a conversation. That isn't always by providing expertise. I often deal with people that are right at the start of their career and they don't know much at all and they feel very intimidated by LinkedIn. And I say to them, just go in there and ask questions. By asking questions, you're facilitating others to be able to demonstrate their knowledge. And that's good for them and helps you build your profile and knowledge along the way, right? So commenting on other people's content is by far the most important thing you can do initially in terms of raising visibility. And of course, along with that, you start to build more connections and more relevant connections. And then you can start thinking about posting your own content. By this time, of course, you've got associates that you're regularly engaging with. You start posting content. They see that content. They start commenting on it. They start spreading that to their network. And on you go from there, right? Now, content, when you're posting content, um, there's lots we could say, but I would say the most important thing that you're aiming to do is start a conversation. Always start a conversation. And what I mean by that is you're not projecting something, you're not standing in a corner going, hey, look at me. Right? What you're doing is you're trying to stimulate other people to get involved. And by doing that technique, whichever way you want to do it, whether that's video, image posts, text only posts, they can all work, right? But the one thing that's consistent with good content is that you're encouraging people, not saying please comment or anything like that, or comment if you want a report of this or all that rubbish. That's just tricks, right? Post content that people will feel they want to comment on, that then stimulates conversation. That's how you gain visibility to your post going forward.
Brilliant, Mark. Brilliant. And what's your view on frequency? Do we need to post every day to be successful? Once a week? What's your view on that?
Not a huge fan of anything that's overly formulaic like that, to be honest. I think what you need to do is you need to be consistent in the sense of regularly turning up.
Mm.
And regularly doesn't have to be every day. It probably does need to be at least once a week in terms of posting. One formula I would say to you is you should be commenting at least 5 times more than you're posting, at least 5 times more, and probably more like 10 times more. So just to put that in some kind of context, right? So if you've only got time to comment on 5 posts a week, then that's just one post a week. Okay. Work on that kind of ratio as a minimum. So the more you can do, the greater the ratio, the better really in terms of comments on other people's posts. that really stimulates the algorithm in the right way. Okay, that's kind of creating the right sort of environment for visibility. But I'm not a fan of this kind of once a day or twice a day, or you see some people like 5 times a day. There's no great value in that. And one other thing I would say, if you do a post and you're lucky enough for it to really engage, so loads of people are commenting on it, do not post again until that dies off. Because all you're going to do is distract from that. You want that to run as long as you can. Probably not going to run for very long, 2, 3 days, something like that. But just that's what I mean about formulas always worry me, because if someone says, I post on a Monday and a Wednesday and a Friday, and the Monday post does really well, and there's loads of people comment on it, just dump the Wednesday post, put that off till Friday, right? Don't just do it because it's Wednesday. Think on your feet, do the right things. Always focus on engaging more than posting. That's absolutely critical to being visible on LinkedIn.
That is just such good advice because you're right. By putting another post in, you're detracting from the one that's doing really well. It just makes sense. And I hadn't really thought about it actually. So thank you. We're starting to come to the end of our time together, Mark. It's just whizzed by. If you could share maybe one or two simple actions that a coach listening today could take straight after this conversation to improve their LinkedIn presence, what would you say it needs to be?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to kind of repeat myself because it's such an important point, but commenting would be the number one thing. And
Mm,
but before you do that, take a step back and go, what image am I trying to project here? Who am I? And don't make that falsely up. So don't go, what image do I want to project? But it's not really me. Think about who you are. Talk to people that know you well, people that you've worked with, people that in your family, people that really understand your personality, and then make sure that you stick to that and that you're always authentic in the way you present yourself. And then start commenting in that authentic way. One of the things I think that people get wrong, and I understand why, but when they comment, they don't do it with a voice that we can recognize as being authentically them. So
mm,
it's like, if you see a post and you think I've got a view on that, don't stop and go, oh, but if I said this, then someone might think this, or and overthink it. Like, people are going to think badly of me, or I mean, obviously don't do anything unprofessional, but this is what people do is they kind of stop themselves by going, okay, so I'll just go for something safe, which might be great post or I really agree with this. Rubbish like that. I can't tell anything about you. It tells me nothing. And also, the algorithm doesn't really recognize things like that. But if you say something that adds value, okay, this is a great post, but I think this. And one other point I would make is, and this is what I stand for. So I'm not talking politics here. What I stand for, right? Meaning in business, in my line of work, in my day-to-day work, people will know what I stand for is this, right? And as long as you can keep projecting that on a consistent basis, that's when people will go, I like where you're coming from, or I don't. And that's absolutely fine. You don't want everyone's to be a customer, right? It's not possible. But so go down that route, understand who you are, present that in a way that people really understand and get a grip of who you are. And that's when the magic seems to happen. Certainly, that was my experience of that and others that I've worked with. The magic happens when you're brave enough to really be yourself and be consistent to that message.
love that, Mark. And it so aligns with who we need to be as coaches, to step into our authentic selves, to really own and remember our values and sort of and stay by that. So if we're going to be values led coaches, then we need to be values led in our networking online and offline. As Mark said, make a comment, stand in who you are. And as somebody has already posted, Mark, you're a breath of fresh air in today's hard, and I've really noticed it recently, a really sort of aggressive take now on marketing. The landscape's changed a bit recently. It's really lovely to sort of hear that it's about people, it's about making the connections, it's the know like trust. People buy from people that they like. So, do the work, walk the floorboards, and you will find that the work will come to you. There isn't the hacks and the fast track stuff that many people will lead you to believe out there. So Mark, thank you so much. If people want to connect with you, where do you hang out? And I think I pretty much know what you're going to say, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah, so as a test for people who were listening earlier, I did mention my LinkedIn URL before. So the last time I counted, there are about 3,500 Mark Williams is on LinkedIn. So it's quite a common name. But you should be able to find me through that URL if nothing else. So yeah, LinkedIn is the right place to find me for obvious reasons.
Brilliant, Mark. Thank you. Thank you again so much for some really refreshing reminders of how we connect with people. And we're in a people to people industry, so let's keep it that way, everybody. Thanks again, Mark, and thank you for your
Pleasure.
valuable time and sharing with us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today, and I look forward to seeing you all again next time on Coaching Conversations. Please do make sure that you have taken away at least one of the many, many actionable tips that Mark has shared today. Note down for yourself, what is it that you're going to do as a result of today's conversation? Until next time, take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.